Good evening, everyone. My name is Misba Bhatti. I am the research analyst at the Center for International and Regional Studies in Georgetown, Qatar. So this is extra special and lovely to be here on main campus and having this conversation with our wonderful panelists. And on behalf of Georgetown, Qatar, and CIRS, I would like to welcome you all to tonight's talk titled The Evolution of Basketball in the Middle East. This particular event is part of our research project titled America's Game in the Middle East, the 2027 Qatar Basketball World Cup. Sports has been a core theme that CRS has studied and produced work on over multiple years. We have a project and a publication on sports, politics, and society. We have a book on football in the Middle East. We also have two research projects with Danyel Reiche, who is on the panel today. For more details on these research projects, events that we've hosted, and our publication, please visit our website, cirs.georgetown.edu. For tonight's panel, we are going to discuss the history and the popularity of basketball across Middle East. So there's a lot to unpack, and I am really excited to hear what our panelists have to say. But before that, a couple of housekeeping points. If you could just turn your phones off so it doesn't disrupt the flow of the conversation. If you could come up front. As I said, it's nice for the pictures, for the website. And we will have time for audience Q&A. So if you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand and I'll be happy to give you the mic. After the panel, please join us for a reception. We would love to have you for the evening. So our panelists for tonight on my very right is Nadim Nassif, who is an associate professor in physical education and sports at Notre University in Lebanon. His research interests include sports history, coaching, and sports management. Next, we have Onur Yıldırım, who is a professor and chair of economics department at Middle East Technical University in Ankara. His research focuses on economic history of the Middle East and the history of forced migration and refugees. Daniel Reiche is a visiting professor at the Center for International Regional Studies at Georgetown University, and his research includes politics, energy, and sports policy. Last but not the least, Sebastian Sons, who works as a senior researcher for the Center for Applied Research in partnership with the Orient CARPO. His field of interest includes sports politics and sports diplomacy for Saudi Arabia and Qatar, developmental cooperation policies, and foreign assistance policies of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, and Kuwait. And with that, I invite Nadim to give us his opening remarks.
That's it from here. Hi, everyone. I'm very proud to be here. Very grateful for this opportunity. So the research that I've been involved in is to first measure the popularity of basketball worldwide, and then see the benefits that Qatar will have in hosting this event, the FIBA World Cup in 2027. So how do we measure the popularity of a sport? I am using a research-based index, which is the world ranking of countries in elite sport. It's a ranking that rank all the countries that have national Olympic committees, so 206 countries. So the primary objective of this ranking is to measure the performance of national teams. It's not to look at popularity of sport. But to do that, we weight each sport based on their level of competition. And to measure the level of competition of each sport, we took two variables. One is universality, so how much the sport is played worldwide. And the second one is the global media popularity of each sport. So it's indirectly that we have identified what are the most popular sports in the world. And how do we measure the global media popularity of each sport? We go on the top sport website of each country, and we do a pointing system for each sport. And then we multiply this point by the GDP, by a coefficient based on the GDP of each country. It's a research that was peer-reviewed and published in a scientific journal. So this is how we were able to identify what are the most popular sports around the world. And the result of this is basketball is number 2, just after soccer or football. I mean, we call it football. We call it here soccer. I don't want to have a problem with anyone here. So basketball is number 2 in the world. Now, second part of the research, what's in it for Qatar to organize the 2027 FIBA World Cup? Well, First of all, the FIBA World Cup is, according to our data, is not the number one international basketball sport competition. The number one is the Olympic tournament, basketball Olympic tournament. So the FIBA World Cup is a qualifier for the Olympic basketball tournament. So will Qatar benefit from it if we take the FIBA World Cup as an event by itself? Qatar already organized more important competition. Namely, you had the 2022 FIFA World Cup, the Football World Cup was way more important. But if we consider that organization of this event, of the FIBA World Cup, is part of a series of events that will lead to the Asian Games in 2030, and then probably to the 2036 Olympic Games, well, it's very important for Qatar to host this FIBA World Cup. And if Qatar wants also to develop grassroots sport, because the weakness of Qatar, this is another index that we developed in our think tank, is the World Sport Power Index. We measure the capacity that countries have in using sport to develop their soft power. And this index has three variables: performance of national teams, hosting of major events, and the local visibility, the global visibility of the local professional sport leagues. And Qatar has some issues in performance of national team. And this can be solved by developing sport at grassroots level. So by organizing the FIBA World Cup, the Asian Games, and the Olympic Games, if there is a national policy in Qatar to really develop all the sport at a grassroots level, then perhaps it's a way for them to develop their sport power, we can call it like that. If they want to count exclusively on just hosting events, now they have major competitors now, especially in the region. Now Saudi Arabia is pouring a lot of money in hosting of events, and Saudi Arabia has more cities, has more money than Qatar. So perhaps if Qatar wants to use this event to develop the sport at a national level, perhaps it would be a positive strategy. So this is the research that I'm involved in. That's it.
Thank you, Nadim. Onur?
Okay, I'm not going to actually talk about my own research. I'm going to talk about, give you some reflections on the main theme of the conference, of the workshop. That's named American Influence in the Middle East Through Basketball. I mean, the basketball is obviously, I mean, it may seem like just another sport, but it's also, I mean, it has functioned as a vehicle of cultural diplomacy, as Edward Said would call it, cultural imperialism. And nowadays, the most popular concept is soft power. So it is also a vehicle of soft power. So I'm going to sort of just offer a few reflections on how the US has projected influence in the region through basketball. And I'm going to be a bit biased. My emphasis is going to be on Turkey, basically. Okay, that's where I come from. Basketball's story, its journey actually maybe started in Massachusetts, but then it found its way to youth courts in Cairo, Istanbul, Beirut, and a lot of other places in the 19th century. Basketball is about identity, it's about politics, and it's about the globalization of consumer culture. It intersects with processes that were already underway in the Ottoman Middle East in the 19th century, processes best understood through the lens of, I would say, political economy. Western economic and political structures deeply shape local growth patterns, state policies, and class formations. As the region opened to European markets and influence in the 19th century, new urban elites, particularly from the non-Muslim communities, they embraced Western aesthetics, consumption habits, and leisure forms. There's a wonderful book by a Lebanese scholar, Toful Abu Hodayib, on Ottoman Beirut. I think it captures it very beautifully, how consumption, trade, and aesthetics converged to redefine domestic life in Beirut, but in general in the late Ottoman Middle East. I would say it's in this climate, in this particular context, basketball also entered the repertoire of modern urban pastime activities, appealing especially to a rising class drawn to Western forms of education, fashion, and entertainment. These are issues that I didn't touch upon in my paper, but these are, I would say, this is the background against which we should understand the evolution of basketball, which is the main theme of our small meeting here. I mean, basketball's early international spread was closely linked to YMCA and obviously American missionary schools, and later came in the 20th century military bases, Hollywood, cable television, and eventually the NBA. Over the 20th century, basketball evolved into more than just a sport. It became a model of American modernity, discipline, and individual competitiveness. And during the Cold War, which is the main focus of my research, basketball played a subtle but powerful role in the US's soft power arsenal, complementing Hollywood and rock and roll in the projection of cultural distinctiveness and superiority. And one would also add the word originality. In Turkey, basketball started early in the 20th century through American schools. Robert College would be the first place to mention. In Robert College, I mean, their physical education teachers were particularly interested in basketball. One of the guys, Dr. Danyel, was a good friend of Naismith, the inventor of basketball. So he even used his booklets, manuals in his classroom. Then there was the Galatasaray High School, another major school in the Ottoman Empire. And basketball was also taught in the school and became part of the curriculum. I have this wonderful quotation from one of his writings of this guy, Ahmet Robinson, who was the physical education teacher in Galatasaray High School. He says, at the end of the first game that was played in the school, he says, quote, "No one was left without a broken nose or a split eyebrow." Okay, this is almost like 1921. He's talking about basketball. I mean, there's some wonderful findings that I have from the Turkish newspapers and journals of the time about the introduction of basketball to the region. But I'm talking about Turkey. But I would say the pattern that we observe in Turkey is sort of common. You go to Lebanon, to Beirut, probably in the Syrian college, and then at AUB, more or less the same thing. So there was some kind of an orchestrated effort in the beginning of introducing basketball and using it in a way to sort of spread and diffuse the American way of life, the mindset, the thinking, the discipline, whatever you want to call it. So that was critical. So the basic pattern in the beginning, it was through the schools that the basketball became popular. But in the 1920s and 30s, certain clubs in Istanbul actually organized, came together and organized a league and start to sort of, diffuse the basketball culture to the grassroots. But those people who played basketball in 1920s and 30s, they continued the tradition from the Ottoman times, and most of these people were actually coming from the upper elite classes. To make it more clear, mainly from the non-Muslim communities. As I said, in the Arab world, basketball took stronger roots in places with significant missionary presence, and in Lebanon, as I said, AUB was the place. I mean, I have so much information here, but during the Cold War era, I mean, the most noteworthy point to mention, as institutions like Robert College, AUB, and later my own institution, Middle East Technical University, being established by the joint effort of the Turkish government and the American government, they kind of included basketball in their curricula and modeling their teaching on U.S. liberal arts education and linking it with leadership, civic participation, and character building traits. And let me offer a personal note here. My own institution, from the outset, actually promoted basketball. And in 1962, it founded its basketball club and has been active in national tournaments ever since. During the Cold War, I mean, which was the focus of my talk this morning, the American bases played a significant role in the diffusion of basketball culture, especially in the provinces of Turkey, not necessarily in Istanbul, but in smaller places. And then we also had the Peace Corps, volunteers being more active in small towns and countryside. They also played a significant role in the diffusion of basketball at grassroots level. And today, in the talk that I gave in the morning, I talk about how the American soldiers in a particular base, in a particular military base, teamed up with the local Turkish youth and played in national tournaments and whatsoever, and how basketball became somewhat popular sport among in a community where it did not exist before. And how that collaboration, in a way, planted some kind of a passion and love of the game. Look, there is a lot to say. Maybe in the question and answer period I can say, but in the conclusion, what I want to say, basketball in Turkey and the Middle East has never been just about a sport. It's been a carrier of values, a symbol of modernity, and a stage for geopolitical influence, but influence is never unidirectional. The game has been adapted, localized, and emotionally embedded. It's become part of national identity, of youth aspiration, and of daily life. And I would say, as a conclusion, what began as an import, it has become our own in modern times. That's the small contribution I have.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure we will have more time
Exactly.
in the Q&A
That'd
to
be nice.
unpack some of you've said tonight. Daniel?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. Before I joined Georgetown University in Qatar, I worked at the American University of Beirut, where the basketball in Lebanon started. When it started, the name of the university was Syrian Protestant College, so which fits to what you said, the role of missionaries in the spread of basketball. But I'm going to talk about my research on golf investments into American basketball, and particularly the recent case of the Qatari sovereign wealth fund buying shares of Monumental Sports Entertainment, the company in Washington, D.C. that owns the Washington Wizards, the Washington Mystics, and also the Capitals in the NHL. This happened in 2023 and was labeled by the local media as a case of sports washing, a term I see relatively critical. When we talk about golf investments into international sport, we have mainly in mind the investments into European football. So the Abu Dhabi invested already in 2008 into Manchester City, and 2011 Qatar followed with PSG in France, and 2021 the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund with Newcastle. Why did we not see before investments into American basketball? Because it was not possible. So just since 2020, the NBA allows private equity to own up to 20% of the shares of NBA franchises. And 2022, this rule was amended, and also university endowments, pension funds, and sovereign wealth funds can invest into the NBA. What we have seen before is sponsorships, mainly from Gulf Airlines. We have a mid-season tournament now in the NBA that is named the Emirates Cup. We have the referees in the NBA, you might have noticed, are sponsored by Emirates. And we have Qatar Airways, for example, is also as a sponsor active since 2080 for an NBA team in New York. But now that's actually the first time that a sovereign wealth fund has a small share in an NBA franchise. This was heavily criticized by local media. The editorial board even wrote a critical commentary in the Washington Post. Also, the other newspaper here, the Washington Times, critically reported. And the impression that is given is that this investment has a main goal of distracting from human rights violations in Qatar. So the impression that is giving that this investment is mainly like a public relations measure. And there are references made to the treatment of women, of migrant workers, of the fact that homosexuality is illegal in Qatar. The Washington Times also linked Qatar to Hamas terrorism and the BDS movement. But I think we need to look at, so I think the wrong understanding of this, the use of this term is that there is a thinking that it's mainly about the perception in the West when a sovereign wealth fund makes an investment. And I think it's less about the perception and it's more about the domestic goals. And the general transformation that is taking place in countries such as Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Sebastian will be talking about Saudi Arabia. And we have a general transformation in Qatar since the 1990s. So Education City, where Georgetown is located, started at the end of the 1990s. Al Jazeera started in the 1990s. Qatar Foundation, Qatar Airways, it all started in the 1990s. And when Qatar was submitting its bid for the 2022 FIFA World Cup in May 2009, nobody knew about all these issues in Qatar. People just know about them because Qatar submitted this bid for the World Cup. Now when it comes specifically to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, it exists since 2005. It has assets of more than $500 billion. It's one of the 10 largest sovereign wealth funds in the world. And what is the goal of a sovereign wealth fund? The goal is that one day when oil and gas are not left anymore, future generations still have the wealth that current generations enjoy. So the idea is it's a saving fund. It's to save money for the future, for future generations. And to do this in a way that takes into account that investments need to be across countries, across regions, across branches. And sport is just one of them. And the Qatari Investment Authority has invested in many American companies, and there were never these critical editorials. We just read them when it's about sport. So sport seems to move people more than anything else. And we see this critical commentaries then. So I think from Monumental's point of view, it makes totally sense to cooperate with a sovereign wealth fund and not private equity, because private equity wants to make short-term gains, while a sovereign wealth fund has a long-term horizon. So during my lifetime, Qatar will have plenty of oil and gas left. So it will take a long, long time until oil and gas are not left anymore. Maybe these investments, such as, for example, this one to Monumental, will be withdrawn. So they have a long time horizon that I think makes it very attractive for particularly like an NBA franchise or a Premier League team to cooperate with a sovereign wealth fund. Also, I would like to mention, since these critical commentaries were like criticizing some domestic issues in Qatar, and also I think some of them rightfully criticizing, but there is no evidence that these investments by Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds into Western sporting brands are in any way used to change the values of those communities. For example, tomorrow evening, the Washington Mystics, which are also owned by Monumental, have a home match here in DC, and there's Pride Night. So this Pride Night is also happening now with partial Qatari ownership. So there is no evidence of that the local values would be not respected or so. So I think overall, it's a normal business transaction that makes lots of sense for both sides. And the use of the term sports washing gives the wrong impression that it's like a costly public relation measure, but I think it's more part of a general transformation of Gulf societies.
Thank you very much. And from Qatar, we move to its neighbor, Saudi Arabia. Sebastian.
Thank you so much, Misba, and of course thank you to all of you for coming, and Daniel, you give me the chance to do a really easy job because I can jump on to what you said. So in my research, I'm focusing mainly on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which has created a lot of awareness in the last 2 to 3 years when it comes to their sports strategy. In particular, when we are looking into football, Cristiano Ronaldo, who was starting the boom of international stars in soccer to go to the kingdom was just the start. Then, of course, we had huge investments in Formula One. Aramco, the big oil company, is the premium sponsor of FIFA, but also of the Formula One. We have tennis, we have MMA, we have other sports. There were rumors to invest into darts and whatsoever. Saudi Arabia has tried to, let's say, also do a similar job as Qatar did in the last 20 years in 2 years. And I think that created a lot of attention. When we are looking into the numbers, we have to admit that basketball does not really play a role in this kind of sports strategy so far when we are looking into international investments. So end of 2024, there were 900 sponsorships in sports by Saudi state entities, mainly from the Public Investment Fund or from Aramco. Around 200 of them in soccer, 120 in boxing, and 90 in golf. And of course, here in the US, you might remember vividly this whole controversial debate about LIV Golf Tour and PGA. Only 2 in basketball. The one is the FIBA Asian Cup that will take place this summer in Jeddah. And the second one is the NEOM FIBA 3-on-3 World Tour that is sponsored by PIF. So that means that basketball is not a priority in Saudi Arabia's sports industry, but it plays a significant role. And this role is embedded into the overarching sports strategy of Saudi Arabia, which has to do with mainly 4 reasons. The first one is economic diversification. The second one is positioning the kingdom as a promoter of regional de-escalation, and in this regard, sports diplomacy plays a significant role. The third one is mainly addressed to the young generation in Saudi Arabia. So we have 60% of the population is under 30. We have 35 million people in Saudi Arabia. It's a huge population, completely different to Qatar, for instance. And they are, of course, also facing a couple of challenges. So here, sport serves as a driver for youth and female empowerment, but also for a sense of belonging, creating kind of a national identity to create a new Saudi Arabia, which is different from the past, in which religious elites, for instance, play a very important role. And last but not least, sport is, of course, also a strategic tool for political communication. And here, the US and basketball could play a more relevant role in the future. So economic diversification is key for Saudi Arabia. All of you have heard about Vision 2030. The Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has introduced in 2016. So to diversify the oil-reliant economy away from fossil resources and invest into other sectors: tourism, entertainment, service sector, AI, and of course also sports. So to create a national domestic sport industry, and in this regard also to create jobs for the young generation, is key. And in this regard, maybe also a local basketball industry could become more prominent. So far, it is still related to a couple of minor examples. And here, place branding plays a very important role. So tourism is to attract tourists to attract tourists coming to Saudi Arabia is one strategic goal of the vision. And here, iconic places are becoming much more relevant. For instance, Al Ula, the cultural hub inside in the middle of Saudi Arabia, now has also a basketball club. Al Ula is performing relatively well, I have to say, and this is at least one combination where we see the nexus of nation branding or place branding with sports, in this case basketball. The NEOM Beach Games, where 3-on-3 tournaments are taking place, is another example. So NEOM, the high-tech artificial city on the shore of the Red Sea that is currently developed, is also one of those iconic places that Saudi Arabia wants to use to be put on the map. When it comes to regional de-escalation, definitely Saudi Arabia is changing course in the last couple of years. It now presents itself as a mediator, as a facilitator in regional and international conflicts. Take the Gaza war, for instance, into consideration, but of course also Ukraine, US, Russian talks. And here, of course, also sports diplomacy might play a role. I did not mention the FIFA World Cup in 10 years, which is, of course, a big opportunity also for Saudi Arabia to present itself as a platform of credibility, of trust, and of professionality. The FIBA World Cup, basketball Asian Cup, sorry, this summer hosts, for instance, Iran. So the Iranian basketball team will come to Saudi Arabia, which also gives, to some extent, the opportunity to engage more in Iran-Saudi reconciliation, which has gained much more strategic relevance in the last 2 years. Female and youth empowerment, the third dimension of basketball investment is showcased by introducing basketball into school curricula, implementing a couple of girls tournaments across the country, basketball residence programs organized by the Sports for All Federation, and a lot of other community sport initiatives in which basketball play a role. And last but not least, and this is quite an interesting level of basketball diplomacy, is political communication. And in this regard, of course, the reconfiguration of Saudi-US relations could play a relevant role. I mean, we all have followed the Trump visit to Riyadh, which was highly appreciated by the Saudi side. Of course, a lot of deals have been signed. But honestly, there are also, let's say, it's an ambivalent relationship between USA and Saudi Arabia. And here, of course, basketball could play a role. So far, PAF has not invested into NBA clubs, and there are no real discussions about it. But for instance, there are at least speculations that Saudi Arabia might invest in a new alternative Euro-Asian basketball league. And this reminded me a little bit on the Saudi strategy with LIV Golf Tour to also maybe challenge the monopoly of the US and of the NBA and use it as a bargaining chip at the end to maybe also find better business or political deals. So in this regard, basketball or sport in general could create more leverage when it comes to political influence, when it comes to market access. And in this regard, although basketball is not top priority, it's still kind of a fascinating example how sport politics and sport economy and sport diplomacy are intertwined with the overarching strategic goals of the kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions to the panelists myself, and I'm also conscious of the time. So I'm going to do one round and then open it up to the floor. I'll start with you, Nadim. You talked about the index, and what struck me was you were talking about the elite sports in this, right? And I was wondering how much of that captures the cultural and the social dimension of basketball's reach, or whether it's just an overemphasis on the elite competition.
Okay. So it's impossible to separate elite sport from youth and grassroots and from community sport. Impossible. At one point, every elite athlete was a young kid playing a sport somehow. Now it changes in some country. In country where you had state funded sport, like the former communist country, like in Soviet Union. I mean, he was scouted by a special school and he went to train. But at one point, every kid started to play sport somewhere. How he climbs in the pyramid, it depends on the governance of every country. So the cultural aspect of a society is very predominant in any elite sport system. So you cannot have a pertinent result at the elite level if you don't have a system where youth are exposed to a certain practice of sport. So the cultural aspect is always present. And the cultural aspect is not only for those who want to play, it's also for those who want to organize. Because most of the sport around the world, forget the big leagues, most of the leagues, in regional leagues, are organized by volunteers. A volunteer is someone who's giving time to work. So he's indirectly funding the system. So what drives these people to wake up Sunday morning at 6 o'clock and travel to go organize a competition and where they receive zero credit from it? No one knows these guys. I mean, no one knows these guys. And they are investing in sport. So this is a cultural interest that they have in really supporting the sport system. So the cultural part is very predominant in. And by the way, in the book that I have written, was published in 2023, which is National Success in Elite Sport, exploring the factors that lead to success. The cultural factor is present. Is present.
So, sorry about that. Elite competition goes hand in hand with cultural aspect, and it's impossible to reach that level without that. Thank you very much for that. Onur, I want to start with something that you ended with. You said what was imported has now become local. And I want to push you on that in terms of when this American soft power through basketball was introduced, how much of societal pushback was there a societal pushback in terms of embracing this foreign game in lieu of the local games, and how much of it was embraced and how much of it was not seen as something that was locally healthy?
I mean, if you go back in time in the late 19th century Ottoman Empire, I don't think there was any discussion of society resisting anything if it was introduced from top down. So that was the thing. And when it was started to be sort of taught at Robert College and then Galatasaray High School, I mean, the people who attended there were coming from pretty well-to-do families. And with no contact whatsoever with the rest of the society. So there was really, I think it was sort of, it took a long while for basketball to sort of diffuse to the rest of the society, the grassroots level. So I would say there was really no reaction whatsoever. The guy that I talked about, this Ahmet Robinson guy, I mean, he did his best to sort of, make the sports a popular one in the school and around the school. So he organized games with Robert College and everything. And then in a very short period of time in Istanbul, there were about like 6-7 clubs that sort of, came together and organized the league. But most of those clubs were basically manned by people coming from, elite families, basically. So it took a long while for basketball to become, a sport of the larger Turkish community, so to speak.
Okay. It has become.
Exactly. But it's a story, I would say, from 1980s onwards. It's a global story. I don't think Middle East in this sense is sort of unique. So wherever you go, it could be Latin America, it could be anywhere in Asia, more or less the same pattern is there. And it's becoming obviously more of a commercialized sector. And there, I don't think that there is a sort of a direct influence of this or that country. It's become sort of a, a general, global, universal sport in its own way.
Thank you very much. Let's take it home, Danyel. Let's talk about Qatar. So there has been a lot of hype of basketball in Qatar. There has been the NBA pre-season games that started in Abu Dhabi, but then there was also the junior NBAs that took place in Qatar. And then, as you mentioned, Qatar's involvement in Washington Mystics through the acquisition of Monumental shares. Why so much interest in basketball all of a sudden?
I think from the American perspective, when we look at North American sports, basketball is the only one that has truly globalized. So American football, okay, Super Bowl is followed around the world, but it's a niche sport in most countries. Baseball, okay, Korea, Japan, Caribbean, but it's also not really a global sport. Lacrosse, I think if we would make a survey in my home country of Germany, 95% of people would know that this is a sport. So basketball is the only sport that's truly globalized. So it gives an opportunity for both sides, opportunity for engagement. The NBA, if it wants to grow, it needs to grow outside of the US. Here, it already makes so attractive TV deals. And when we look at the British Premier League in soccer, they make now most of the money with broadcasting deals abroad. And the NBA is still far away from that. So I think if it wants to grow, it needs to grow abroad. And if Qatar, for example, that hosted the FIFA World Cup, if Dubai, they're doing this, hosting rugby, tennis since many years, but if they want to engage with the US, then basketball is a perfect platform. And now we have seen really some hyperactivity. Sebastian just told me before the event, the news that now a team from Dubai will start next season in the EuroLeague. Abu Dhabi was hosting NBA preseason games. So really, we have now a lot of activity. Again, I think for the NBA, if they want to grow, they need to grow abroad. And for other countries and the Gulf, basketball is a perfect opportunity to engage with America, and it's a better opportunity than other sports to engage with America.
Thank you. Sebastian, very quickly, I have two questions. One is a more broader one. So you talked a lot about the Saudi Arabia's sports strategy, but other GCC countries do have similar sports strategies. So how would you compare that Saudi Arabia's sports strategy to other nations, their neighbors? Qatar has one, UAE has one. And what is Saudi Arabia doing that other countries are not doing? And my next question might be a bit irrelevant and you cannot answer it. How much of basketball's popularity in Saudi Arabia has to do with Mohammed bin Salman? Because he has gone on record and said, that's my favorite sport.
Yeah. So to your first question, I think the biggest difference between Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Gulf is its size and population. So therefore, the sports strategy is, as Danyel also rightly said, it's not for us, it's not for outsiders, it's for the own population. And at the end, it's a socio-economic necessity. It will be very relevant to get return on investments. So it's not just for show. It's not sports washing at all. It's a dimension in which Saudi Arabia needs to transform its social contract away from oil, fundamentally. And here sport is an industry in which jobs can be created in the service sector, in management, in marketing, in coaching, in wheresoever. So we will see, and this is, I think, the hugest difference to smaller Gulf states such as Qatar or the UAE. We will see more investments out into Saudi sport education, to training facilities, into the whole community sport level, and tremendous activities have been already introduced, which is not in the news, not necessarily. And we will also see further investments down the line when it comes to sport as a lifestyle. To really to do sports is now part of Saudi identity, and that was never the case before, not on a national scale. So there is a KPI in Vision 2030 that says 40% of the population should do sports regularly a week, and this is already achieved. I'm not a big fan of those statistics because they literally say nothing. But when you are in Saudi Arabia and I've been there for the first time 2008, and there was no gym at all. There were no opportunities in public spaces to do sports. Now you have the Riyadh Sports Boulevard, which is under construction. The King Salman Park is under construction, where you always have open door and outdoor sport facilities, etc., etc. You have different other places in the kingdom, and that tells a story. It's irreversible, and it is also for for the leadership extremely important to showcase that the new Saudi Arabia is, it's not only a brand that you can sell to the world and it's attractive to invest in, it's also something that people can identify with. I mean, the person of MBS is always kind of important, in particular for a specific strata of society, a well-educated urban middle class, the generation MBS, so people under 40. If he is a role model for basketball, I don't know. Some people told me, yes, that might be the case. Basketball was always kind of prominent not on a professional level, but on a leisure level. I think MBS is a role model for so many things, in particular when it comes to work ethos, when it comes to, let's say, the perception of strong leadership. Of course, also when it comes to gaming, I think he's more popular because he's a big gaming fan, esports fan, rather than a big basketball player. But of course, his person plays a role in promoting sport in general as kind of a new, or as kind of a lifestyle ingredient, as kind of Saudi patriotism.
Thank you. And you mentioned King Salman National Park, and I was in Riyadh recently, and it's massive.
It's massive.
It's massive. It's the size of a mini city, and I'm looking forward to the final product. I wonder how would they maintain it. It's in the middle of a desert. So yes, a lot of new projects coming up. All right, with that, we have come to the end of our discussion. Please join me in thanking our panelists for tonight.